So it's time to address the big question. The big question being, who should you vote for in the 2015 general election on May 7th? I hope it's not you. I think it was May 7th, 2010. Although it might have been it was May 8th, 2010, May 7th, 2015. Anyway, who should you vote for in May 2015? Now I want to clarify a few points beforehand, and the first point is that is regarding America. And that's mostly because I see a lot of Americans who get pissed off with the idea that you shouldn't vote for anyone. And you might think that I'm the type of person who would say that you shouldn't vote for anyone, and you'd be right. I would say that you shouldn't vote for anyone. But I've just developed a new theory, and I think if you're an apathetic voter, then this theory is right for you, because I am very apathetic, as will become apparent. But I will now vote based on this brilliant theory. So I want to talk about American voter apathy. In America, obviously both their parties are shit and their entire system is absolute bollocks, because it doesn't allow for any real chance of a third-party candidate, and anyone who defends the American electoral system basically deserves to live in a dictatorship. But, actually, I will just compound this point slightly more. When you tell, especially if you're any type of European, but I think Western European countries that aren't Britain, because Britain doesn't even have the best voters electoral system, tell Americans how many countries, how many parties you have in your parliament, or whatever your equivalent to the parliament is. Us, I believe it's about 13. In America, it's 2. It's just pretty evenly-ish divided in the Senate and representatives, just between the Democrats and Republicans. And as much as it appears to shock Americans that virtually every other democratic country has more than 2 parties, it shocks me that America just has 2. And it's not necessarily, I mean, I understand that the parties in America are quite small, but I'm shocked that the Libertarian Party doesn't even have a single seat in the representatives, or in Congress, I should say, just to be simpler. And I believe I'm right about that fact. I was right about it last time I checked. So, you know, America's got a horrible system you can't change, and both parties are basically just neoliberal, corporatist, not exactly totalitarian, but not as liberal as I think a lot of people would prefer. And I'm using liberal to kind of mean libertarian, as in with a penchant for liberty. And with all of this being the case, and me conceding that I think the British vote system is better, you would have thought I would oppose Americans voting. Like, I would have thought Americans certainly have a reason for it. And I kind of still do have a reason for Americans to vote. And that's because looking in, even though the Democrats seem to be getting increasingly more right-wing, or maybe not increasingly more, but they remain very right-wing on a lot of issues, and are certainly not as left-wing as I know a lot of Americans would like them to be. The Republicans are fortunately so insane, like, so insane that I can't think of a single country in a single other country in Europe or North America or Australasia where they would be elected. And obviously there was a poll done in the lead up to the 2012 elections where they basically saw what each country wanted to win, and Obama was winning in every single one except for Pakistan, where he of course supports or has seen over a system that's murdered hundreds of Pakistani civilians, so they just hate Obama, which they have every right to. I hate Obama, but it still makes sense for an American liberal to vote out vote in the Democrats, because the Republicans are so terrible. And again, I think what's shocking, especially when you hear, like I hear Americans and they complain about how their two parties are the same. Four, at least, of our parties are, as far as I'm concerned, basically exactly the same. And if you want a bit of history on this, and there's also another fifth party that I consider to kind of be a viable option, but I don't think they're exactly the same. So you have traditionally, of course, Conservatives and Labour. Old Labour, as it is known now, was Social Democrats. They believed in nationalising the means of production, not completely, but to a degree, hence social democracy. Conservatives have historically opposed giving workers the right to vote, giving women the right to vote, lowering the voting age, getting rid of laws against homosexuality, generally doing what Conservatives do, which is slowly losing everything they stand for, but somehow still acting as if they have integrity. And Liberals have been mostly advancing social reform while rejecting social democratic ideas and supporting a more free market approach, but not. I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking, Liberals are classical liberals. They aren't. They are social liberals. They do support the state having a progressive tax system and, wealth redistribution, all of that. But we also have social democracies. So relative to our economic spectrum, liberals could be considered in the centre, whereas in America, liberals are considered to be, as far left as it gets for a lot of people. But what broadly happened is the Liberals were out of power for 100 years, and it was between the Conservatives and the Labour or National Labour. And what happened is that in 1997, Labour had spent 17 years out of power, and Tony Blair, he actually did this in 1985, I believe, Tony Blair, who you might have heard of, established a system called New Labour, which was mostly around reforming Clause 4, and Clause 4 basically was the part that said that it would nationalise industry to the best of its financial capabilities, and he changed it to basically free market capitalism, or not free market capitalism, but liberal capitalism, and the other thing he didn't do this on paper exactly, but he radically increased Britain's involvement in foreign countries and established an idea called the Blair Doctrine, which was basically the idea that Britain had a moral obligation to involve itself in humanitarian crises. He got us involved in 2 illegal wars, he was very pally with George Bush, and he increased our prison population by 1/3. It was 60,000 people in 1997, which was in and around 10% of the population. 1% of the population, I think. I'm trying to do some quick maths. No, 0.1%? 0.1% of the population, which is good, relatively, I suppose, but, and then it went up to 80,000 by 2007, which was when Blair left office. So he did a lot of things that you definitely wouldn't have associated with the old Labour. The old Labour was opposed to war, opposed to prisons, internationalisation. Weirdly, a lot of leftists, and I'm using that term to include liberals, I wouldn't usually, but complain that parties only move right, and it's very rare, but the party moved left, but it actually happened here. The Conservatives under David Cameron, and for this I do like David Cameron. In fact, I do kind of like David Cameron, but they rebranded themselves, and David Cameron said that he didn't want to be the nasty party, and they changed their logo to a tree, and they introduced a lot of environmental policies. They obviously have either introduced or basically set the ball rolling to the point where gay marriage will be inevitably legal. So they've done a lot of progressive things. I'm not going to go into all of it. So Labour moved right, Conservatives moved left. They are the same fucking party. It's just complete. There's no difference, and I can't even handle the idea that anyone still votes for Labour or Conservatives thinking they're voting for different parties. Labour have done a lot of right-wing things, Conservatives have done a lot of left-wing things. If you put up their policies next to each other, if you read their manifestos, you couldn't tell which one is which. Liberals kind of fall into this. Being the middle, they've basically just got squished in. You know, like if you're trying to be the middle of two parties that are the same, then you're the same. They also had a coalition with the Conservatives, which is still in currently. UKIP, slightly different, but the thing about UKIP is they're bullshit. UKIP has a manifesto that could never work. It's basically just designed to encourage idiots who don't understand finance and don't realise that we simply cannot afford their policies. It's encouraging people like that, people who vote UKIP, to support the UKIP over other parties and basically kind of to just advance their credibility, and then in maybe the next election cycle they will actually try and establish something a bit more workable, I'm sure. But what we know is that if they were elected, then their policies would ultimately end up basically the same as every other party's. I mean, they claim they want to be tough on crime, increase our military, cut taxes, give the rich corporate bailouts, and increase taxes on the poorest 10%. Yes, they actually at least have the balls, I suppose. Well, actually, they don't outright say it. But their tax plan is basically to increase taxes on the poorest 10% and decrease taxes for the richest, even though we've got massive wealth inequality that we haven't had before. And that is basically what all the other parties are doing, but to less extreme ways, and I think it's reasonable to say that UKIP will not be as extreme when they're in power, so I do consider them to be the same. The one remaining party is the Green Party, which do have different policies, but they've got a very weak leadership. I do not rate the Green Party's leadership since Caroline Lucas left, and it just puts me off voting for them. I don't think, you know, they would probably be a bit like Obama. They would, you know, talk about all these great things they're going to do, and then when they come up against opposition from anything, they would compromise and crumble, and at the end of the day still probably get accused of being too much of an ideologue. So that's why I don't fancy the Green Party. So I think all 5 parties are basically the same, and you'd think, how can I possibly think that one party should be voted for? And what I broadly say is vote Labour. Now, when I say vote Labour, people think, what? Why would you want to vote Labour? You've just admitted that they're not great. In fact, they're probably going to increase the prison population. They're probably going to do much of the same that they did under Blair. And I do think Labour might actually be worse than the Conservatives. My argument for voting Labour would still stand even if Labour was worse than the Conservatives. And I should probably refine my argument slightly more and say that the technical argument would be vote for the party that you think will beat the Conservatives. Now, if you just look at statistics, that's most likely to be the Labour. But if you do live in a constituency where that isn't the case, then vote Green or UKIP. You know, you can even vote UKIP. As much as I hate UKIP, vote UKIP to keep the Conservatives out. Now that sounds like I must hate the Conservatives, because, you know, I'm basically saying vote for fascists just to keep Conservatives out. Actually, no, in line with what I said, I think that they're basically the same as Labour and could possibly be more in line with my views as Labour. What I hate is not the Conservatives, I hate the government. And I should more properly say I hate governments. I hate the governments we've had in the UK. I believe we've had 5 good Prime Ministers, and that's if you define a good Prime Minister as someone who has held to their beliefs, done something pretty monumental for Britain, had a decent legacy, and at least made Britain better in some way. And in order from best to worst, those are Ramsay MacDonald, Harold Wilson, Margaret Thatcher, Winston Churchill, Tony Blair. Now, obviously it goes without saying that if you just considered the advancement of policies that I consider to be beneficial to Britain, then this list would decrease, because of course I oppose Tony Blair. You might be able to imagine I oppose Margaret Thatcher, and I think Winston Churchill is massively overhyped, and it's no wonder he got voted out in 1945, because he didn't really have any decent social policies. So it's actually just, I think we've had 2 decent Prime Ministers since the beginning of the 20th century, and those were Ramsay MacDonald and Harold Wilson. So I bring that up simply because we're likely to just keep having bad governments. You know, whatever government we elect, they're just going to keep doing the same thing that every single government has done for the last 30, 40 years. And no party deserves to hold a position in government, but no government deserves, you know, the only thing that deserves less to hold a position in government is the government, because the government never deserves a second term. Even if every single party was worse than the Conservatives, even if the Conservatives were your best option, chances are they're still not good enough to deserve a second term. You'll be better off handing a second term to a different party, because if you vote for the Conservatives based on the idea that you think the Conservatives might be the better option, then what you're basically saying is that all you need to do to win a second term is to be the better option. And I know a lot of people talk about the lesser of 2 evils, and they say, oh, you shouldn't vote for a party just because they're the lesser of 2 evils. Obviously I believe that, but I believe that at times you should vote for a party that is the worst of 2 evils, because you can't make the lesser of 2 evils think that they can get away with doing a piss poor job. So basically what I'm saying is, in 2015, vote out the Conservatives. In 2020, chances are you'll be voting out Labour. In 2025, vote out the Conservatives. probably short of the revolution, nothing really will change, and they'll just keep being shit. But maybe they'll start to get the message that you don't deserve a second term for being shit, or a third term, or a fourth term. So hopefully someone out there will watch this and realise that this argument is perfect for the apathetic voter. If you believe that every single party is shit, if you believe that the government is always shit, if you believe that there's no point voting for a party because no matter what they do, or no matter who they are, no matter what they say they'll do, they'll end up doing the same shit, then you definitely would agree that no party deserves a second term. So vote the Conservatives out of office, even though they're probably better than Labour.